Recently, players have been trying to get the Quake TP consistently. Actually, there's a trick for it, and I figured it out by decompiling and some solo discoveries. This delved farther than my knowledge of Hammer and actually went into some lessons on CSGO trigger and entity bugs. So the first thing to note is going through triggers has always been a bit buggy, especially on a server that's kind of laggy like Jailbreak. First of all, to make some notice, triggers are almost everywhere you play a map. When you walk through a doorway, you're probably rendering some other spot into the map because you're walking through a trigger. This doesn't mean all triggers are bugged though. In this case, we're using a trigger multiple from when we teleport, and be multiple things. It can set your player model, run a script, teleport you, pick something, do some math, do a bunch of stuff. Trigger multiples are very useful, but in this case, Quake uses a trigger multiple and not a trigger teleport. Normally, trigger multiples aren't that buggy, but because this trigger multiple does something special that I'm going to tell you later, we can get quick, easy Army TP almost every time. Okay, now I'm going to run through a clip of me doing it in single player. On an actual server like Jailbreak, there's more lag, so it might be more consistent from what I'm doing here, but it's still a common trick. Boom, the first thing just happened. We chose a trigger that made a sound confirming we made hard jump. Okay, now you're wondering what the trigger value is. The trigger value is how many triggers we've gone through so far. And in this case, we've gone through one trigger from the start of the match. Now, we're in between a trigger because we're touching a trigger, but we haven't walked through the entire door yet. Okay, I understand, that's probably a little confusing. But at 7:48, I walked through the door, and I'm going to tell you why this works consistently. So take note, this is not a guaranteed way of getting an Armory TP. It is a simply better way of getting it at a higher chance. So first, running around the server, each player has a different trigger value, and it's being reset and added to every so often. But to make it a bit easier to understand, at first we're going to say the trigger value is always 1.5 standing in between the triggers on hard jump. Alright, now our trigger value is 1.5, which isn't an integer, which first is kind of an issue for CSGO to mess with. Now, when we walk through the portal, you'll see that my trigger value turns to 1.73. Well, you might be asking, why doesn't our trigger value not just become 2? Because Hammer likes whole numbers, right? Well no, there's 2 triggers in front of the door, and one of those triggers is 1 pixel wide. Now you might be asking the question, what's wrong with 1 pixel triggers? 1 pixel triggers are notoriously buggy and easy to skip. If you put a trigger hurt on the floor, which hurts players, and you perfectly b-hop on a 1 pixel trigger, you will not get hit by the trigger and you won't die. So in this case, the 1 pixel trigger is what we're bugging out to get a perfect teleport. Okay, now that we know what we're trying to break, we can see how to get a perfect teleport. Okay, we can see when the map starts in 12.3 seconds, which is delay, we're going to have a teleport open up that we're trying to take to Armory. And these coordinates of Armory are really important to what we want to get with our trigger value. Next, I'm going to show you a video of me doing hard jump. And look at the angle I look at in the top left of my show pause. It's very specific to the Armory coordinates, and see if you can correlate. Okay, it's gonna get a little complicated. Look at the top left of my angle. My angle is 73. Now look at the coordinates of Armory. Aren't they similar? Okay, yeah, you might have noticed. The Z coordinate of Armory is the same as the angle that we're looking at. Now, this is precisely what we're looking for. Now, we're gonna add the trigger value to the mix. Alright, now you can see that our trigger value turns to 1.73, and 73 is the coordinates of the Armory, and 73 is the angle that we're looking at. So now using the 1 pixel trigger, the 73 angle, the 73 coordinates of Armory, and the 1.73 trigger value, we can figure out how to get to Armory. Now you might just ask, why don't you get as close as you can to the door? Well, that's because we have to have a triggered value of 1.5. And we can't really consistently get a value of 1.73, but we can try using an angle. Now, I can explain to you a little of a complicated subject, pre-strafe. Okay, the clip shows me falling over and over again, but that's not really important. You can see at the bottom of the screen that my number at the bottom after I jump is inconsistent. Well, that number is our pre-strafe, and our pre-strafe is gained by us moving. In this case, our pre-strafe can be max of 250 units in JB, and because this is inconsistent, you don't always get that 1.73 speed or value. So now our speed is involved in our equation. So we have to figure out the speed and distance we are from the portal with an angle to get a consistent teleport. I'd be like, but distance is like really variable and it's really hard to get. Exactly, so distance doesn't really matter in this case. You can stand in a general area, but as long as you don't go over a certain max speed, you normally get a consistent teleport. But adding all these values together, we can get the highest chance success rate on a TP in Quake. But also remember, other players' values are being set at the same time, so the jumbled mess will mess up the server, but if it's lagging, you'll have a higher consistency rate. Have fun.